In this video, we'll continue to discuss the concept of verb voice. More particularly, we're going to consider the notion of middle voice. Many grammatical errors occur with verbs that can be used in the middle voice. The typical error is using a passive form of the verb. In this video, you'll learn about what middle voice is and how it's different from passive. Let's look at an example to gain a better understanding of how the middle voice works. As the price increases, the quantity demanded decreases. Both of the clauses in this sentence are in middle voice. Let's look at one clause and compare it to some similar active and passive voice sentences. In this case, we can do this because increase can be both transitive and intransitive. The price increases. The store owner increases the price whenever his costs go up. The price is increased by the store owner whenever his costs go up. What can we notice about the middle voice sentence? First, we see that the verb is intransitive. Remember that the subject in a passive sentence, like the bottom one here, is derived from the object of an active sentence with a transitive verb. Second, we can note that the subject of the sentence, the price, looks like the subject of our passive voice example sentence. The price is not the agent of an action, but the thing affected by it. So the types of subjects in middle and passive voice sentences are of a similar type. On the other hand, the form of the verb, increases, is active, not passive. So the verb form of middle and active voice sentences is the same. So then, a clause in middle voice is actually a mix of passive and active elements. It has a subject that is not the agent of an action, as in passive sentences, but it has an active form of the verb. What allows this type of construction is the specific verb meaning, often a change of state. This is what you need to pay attention to. The subject is what is acted on or caused by the action or happening expressed by the verb, which is intransitive. The fact that the middle voice does not have its own distinctive verb form in English unfortunately causes confusion and leads to errors. The fact that the subjects of passive and middle voice sentences are similar just adds to the confusion. You must be wondering what the difference is between the passive and middle voices when both are possible with the same verb. Obviously, the passive sentence that includes the by phrase, explicitly stating an agent of the action, is distinct from a middle voice sentence. The full form of the passive voice sentence has exactly the same information as its active sentence counterpart. The information is just reorganized. A sentence in the middle voice does not and cannot state an agent. A passive sentence without the by phrase is more similar in meaning to the middle voice. But the notion of agency behind the action can be perceived. Some guy who controls how much to charge, even though the agent of the action is not stated. This is not the case in middle voice. When we read a passive sentence, we often know exactly who the agent of the action is, based on the context. On the other hand, when we read the sentence, as the price increases, the quantity demanded decreases, in our econ textbook, we're not wondering increase by whom. We understand that this increase of prices that we're talking about is a result of a variety of complex factors in the economy, as opposed to the actions of a single store owner who's actively marking up his merchandise. The meaning expressed is more a happening than an action. In some contexts, the use of the passive voice in its correct grammatical form might feel wrong or seem weird to native speakers. Even if the verb can be transitive and is not technically a grammatical error. Such errors are often perceived to be grammatical errors caused by a confusion between passive and active voice, but that misses the point of these middle voice constructions. The actual confusion is between passive and middle voice. The authors of the grammar book identify several situations where the middle voice is typically preferred to passive. First, as we suggested in the economics example above, the change of state may result from many factors in a complex situation. In other words, the effect is not caused by a simple, clearly defined agent. Another situation is where the change of state is the focus, and the agent is irrelevant. For example, the post office opens at 9 a.m. tomorrow. It is the happening, the opening at a specific time that matters, not some postal employee unlocking the door. Another situation is where the change occurs in a normal expected manner. For example, expressing an expected physical outcome, as in, the surface of the lake freezes in the winter. Or expressing a typical psychological or social effect, as in the sentence, when she saw how remorseful he was, her attitude softened. Finally, there's the situation where the subject of the change is unstable or fragile, and no agent seems necessary to the result that occurs. The melting icicle dropped to the ground. The metal corroded quickly. The balloons deflated as the days passed. Many verbs that behave in this way, with both transitive and intransitive structures possible, express a change of state, and are quite common in academic and general language. For example, many verbs with the suffix en are ambitransitive, allowing both transitive and intransitive structures. With a transitive structure in the active voice, they mean someone makes something have a certain quality. Or in passive, something is made to have a certain quality by someone, where the agent of the action may be deleted. In contrast, with an intransitive structure in the middle voice, these verbs mean something takes on a certain quality, and there is no sense of a particular agent involved in the change. Here are some examples of these change of state verbs with the en suffix. You might want to pause and read through them. In fact, a large number of verbs express a change of state and have this type of flexibility in possible sentence structures, as these verbs exemplify. Again, you might want to pause the video. So far, we've talked about using the middle voice with intransitive change of state verbs that can also be transitive, with active and passive voice options. Of course, many verbs are primarily or exclusively intransitive. Some of these verbs take agents as subjects, but others have non-agent subjects. Both take an active form of the verb. The latter case, of course, is what we've been calling middle voice. One category that is used a lot is verbs of occurrence: occur, happen, take place. A brilliant idea occurred to me. A car accident happened at the corner. The meeting will take place in London. These are intransitive and are never used in the passive voice. Many errors occur with these verbs. They happen all the time. Here are some other common intransitive verbs that use middle voice. To close, let's highlight some points to keep in mind when composing and proofreading. Never use passive voice with intransitive verbs, whether their subject is an agent or not. These verbs do not take an object, which is what you need as the subject of a passive sentence. When the subject of the sentence is the agent, Use verbs in their active voice form for both transitive and intransitive verbs. Be careful when the subject of a sentence is not the agent. The verb will not necessarily be in the passive voice. The middle voice is an option, sometimes the only option for certain verbs, such as change of state verbs and verbs of occurrence. English language learners frequently make errors in their writing by using passive form verbs rather than the active verb form in middle voice. This error is presumably caused by the type of subject in such sentences. When composing and proofreading, you must pay careful attention to how particular verbs can work. Online corpora, such as the Corpus of Contemporary American English, can be helpful for determining how a particular verb can function. Thanks for watching, and good luck with your writing.